Last night, I used Perplexity on my iPhone to access the Perplexity computer. And I asked it to build me an app, which it did. And I used it, and I'll show you. So the premise is that I want to build a lesson plan tool in which I'm called in to give one class. And it could be on any topic. It could be on any level from, retirees to high schoolers. I get short notice of the class objectives and what topics to cover. For a given day, I might have to present a topic, engage in a small group projects, suggest enrichment resources, and I like to sprinkle in some little known facts, trivia, and even jokes. Can you help with this? That's my prompt. It asked me a couple questions to clarify my intent, and it gave me options. And what subjects do you cover? What's your ideal workflow? And how do you deliver? With a little bit of prompting, it got its context straight and it could start doing research. It set up different agents to go out and find jokes, different agents to find websites and other resource materials, another agent to build a document that I could use as presentation material. And looking at different lesson plan tools that are out there, it found my needs are different. This one-off thing put me in an area where it needed to build something just based on what it had. So let's create a dashboard. It says you enter the topic, objectives, session length, and delivery format, and it will produce a structured outline with objectives, talking points, and activities. And so here's the app, and it's pretty straightforward. Why the War of 1812 started to a group of juniors in high school. And what are the learning objectives? I want students to be able to reflect on what happened in 1812 versus what seems to be happening in our current world. And let's say it's for 60 minutes. And let's say we're going to do it on a in-person class. These are high schoolers, juniors, and seniors. And I'm going to generate the materials. And it takes a while. So this tool is actually going out and using the API to Anthropic in order to get things out of the LLM. But what it's able to do inside Perplexity is scaffold it, build it, generate the web pages, present them to me. And I asked that all of these ideas are now available for me to copy, for instance, into a presentation software. So it's suggesting I start with what's happening in the Middle East, Ukraine, and ask students to brainstorm in pairs what causes nations to go to war today. Then I'm going to go into some history and causes and activities. The key topic points are right here. I'm going to copy these and I'm going to go into Google Gemini and I want to create an infographic to really illustrate what's going on here. So I'm going to create an image, create an infographic based on the following information. And we're going to paste. And there we go. So I feel that working with one system versus another system is great, that I can get the best out of either. And as I'm going forward, I get a sense that I'll have agents doing this for me on my behalf. And in fact, building that app is very clear that Perplexity is having sub-agents going out there and building the various parts in parallel. And that's why it was so quick. And then here we have our graphic. I'm going to download that. And then I'm going to drag that guy into CueCam. And here we have really a complete outline in graphic form that I can walk the class through. And so they get an idea right away to what they're in for that session that I have in front of them. So in a very short amount of time, I've got myself resources that make a lot of sense. And as I look at the various activities that are giving me a way to role play, how to engage the students in something useful, media, and this is background information if they want to learn more. And then, of course, there's some trivia. The Battle of New Orleans was fought on January 8th, 2 weeks after the peace treaty was signed in Belgium, but before news reached the combatants due to slow communication. There's a huge amount of conversation that can come about based on the speed of communication, and of course, there's some jokes. As the LLMs get smarter, the jokes get better. So I'd say these are not great jokes, and that tells me where the LLMs are. Why did the British Navy have such a hard time recruiting sailors for the War of 1812? Because the job had no appeal. They had to resort to impressment. Okay, it's a bad pun, but the working conditions were really impressively awful. These are like dad jokes, and for a high school class, I think they work. What did President Madison say when he heard the British were coming to burn Washington, D.C.? Well, at least we won't have to worry about heating the White House this winter. And that lesson could be applied to programming, could be applied to science, could be applied to math, could be applied to any domain. And what happens when we paste that content into CueCam? We get cards. And the entire presentation, all the detail that are suggested, all the points we want to cover are now in cards with text that I can now shrink down, edit into a useful piece of media that I can now present effectively in a classroom environment.